Hey, okay, we're back. And I think I'm getting my voice back slightly, but I'm here to give some more information about the grid. Trying to do a segment, I guess, called Grid Talk. That way we can keep that dialogue going about the different experiences. And as people share their information with me, I will, with their permission, disseminate that out through these dialogues. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of explain how this concept came about. I mentioned before that I worked a lot with sacred space, and really it's just about setting up kind of a secured area and being in that energy and just doing whatever it is you're going to do. So for me, before all this, I would set that up and I could meditate, or I could relax and just hang out with friends, or just whatever it is that I felt like working on or doing at the time. And one of the most noticeable things about setting up those types of spaces is that you'll notice that the energy is very consistent, and but the actual temperature becomes very neutral when you set that up. So I've set those up before in outdoors. I've set it up in rain, and it never fails that once that's set up, the temperature stabilizes, and the people in it, they are not hot or cold. They are just kind of this neutral, kind of a perfect temperature. And so that is one thing that I noticed setting up the grid. It's kind of interesting because one of the places that it was set up, it tends to get pretty hot and cold. Used to in that location, and so I have not noticed those huge temperature fluctuations as much anymore. And even more so because of that attunement that I did, I have not personally. I'll give you an example. So we had the heater out in the front room for a little while, and that, in the middle of November now, and it's been pretty cold. It's not freezing, but it's been cold, and I haven't noticed. And I guess it's interesting because the people that seem to have the attunements don't have the temperature issue. But the people that don't take that, they're just in the grid, I'm not so certain that they quite have the exact same experience. I think it's maybe not quite as balanced, but they definitely do see some evening out of the temperature. So that's one thing I wanted to note. Also, the whole concept of sharing healing through crystals. This was it was something that I was trying to do, I don't know, maybe a year ago. And I had taken these crystals. I had a couple of them that had kind of broken. And so what I did is, I thanked the crystals, and then I basically gave one to the individual that I was going to be working to help remotely. And it's not necessary to have a crystal. It's not necessarily it's not necessary to have the person have something in order to do remote healing. But I felt like there was an intention set by doing that that really was designed to boost those efforts, rather than just have somebody sit back while I do the work. To me, by them accepting that intention and keeping that on their person, there was a commitment to them continuing to receive that healing whenever I could get the time in to help them. So that was something that I really liked, that element, and I think it's great that this is kind of sharing that element, where there's that intention that's been set, that commitment to keep that, whether it's an attunement or crystal, or hold the space. And I think that is just, to me, it's a little bit more of a commitment by the individual that's trying to receive these benefits. So I'm not saying that the healing will be quite even, but I do believe that as we expand, the more healing that's out there, that's available, the more that will resonate with other individuals that need that healing. So that's kind of the model. And the other thing to note is within the grid, when that work is being done, I've noticed that if a person is doing clearing for themselves, it will trigger something in me as well. And that's kind of how that concept came to be, because there's this shared model that I've been talking about. And that is you can sense it, you can feel it when the individual that you're working with is doing that clearing for themselves. It does seem to help. Was helping me as well, and them as well, in like. So I just think that's going to be really interesting to get the feedback on that and see how this escalates for people and how we can carry one another. Reminds me of the goose story where you have the one goose that's breaking the path for the other, so it's not so much work for everyone, and then they rotate and they take turns. And this is kind of a similar concept to the people that are in that place ready to do that work, can help those that maybe not in that place that day, but they're still carrying the stone, they're still making the commitment, and they still have the intention. And when it's also kind of also interesting that in the group of people that I know, it seems to be the case where you will have at least one person that's in a good place, and they will help lift up the ones that aren't. And there are down days, there are days where people are just struggling, and something happens, like my car story where the car died and I stressed out and I got sick. But I think that it's really it's been fairly consistent that I've been able to notice and see that we're able to carry each other, and that we seem to take turns, I guess, where one person just doesn't have it in them that day and the other ones step up and help them. And that is also kind of built into the same model. And so it's through these experiences and watching these patterns and paying attention and kind of understanding and realizing how this model was supposed to be developed and why, and watching how that's played out in real life, and watching how these interactions work. And so I just think that you have three very important elements here that have shown up in real life in the average, in the average day for me, and also has been something that, in talking to others, it does seem to be something that holds true, not just in the group of people that I'm used to working with, but just across the board. And the other thing, in setting the grid up, I set up two in one of my residents, and it was kind of interesting, and my children were really into video games, and we try and pull them off it and get them to dial it back. But I think it's kind of fascinating that after the grid was set up, they seem to be calmer, and their desire to play the video games and escape reality, so to speak, seemed to dwindle and fall by the wayside. And it wasn't one child, it was all of them. They just kind of, it just tapered off, and they started doing things more creatively. My son decided to write a book. My daughter's been doing a lot of drawing, and they made up their own board game. So this was something, I guess I didn't expect that. I wasn't even really thinking about it, but for whatever reason, there is hemisphere balancing programming to try and help the brain come into balance and be in a healthy state. And so I thought it was just kind of great that there was this interesting, cool side effect. And so I wanted to make note of that, because my children are pretty hyper, normally pretty hyper, and I've noticed that has really calmed way down. And they're still kids, they're still playful, but it doesn't seem to be quite as much, unless they're very tired, in which case it's more of just an exhaustion thing. But very fascinating that they just didn't seem to hold a lot of interest anymore in the video game and the escapism type world. So anyway, that's just one more thing that I wanted to mention as far as the grid, and I'll continue to keep bringing in more information as it comes to me and doing more of these discussions.